Good morning, everyone. So we've had a couple of suggestions for the next series of talks. I'm just trying to remember to write them down and decide which one I'm going to spend the week researching. This week just was, they had to change I live in a loft, so it's all the central air and heat is exposed, so it's all up by my ceiling, and the heat has not been working. Well, what happens is, because heat rises and it's heating the ceiling, the thermostat's on the first floor, and so the heat would keep running to try to heat the place, but the heating unit, which is on the roof, has a cooling system. So if it overheats, it literally freezes, and then it starts blowing cold air. So it took them months to figure out how to fix it. So they finally, came to fix it yesterday. But I had to move all my furniture out of the way so that they could get in there and then put it all back. And this has been quite an ordeal. So one of the suggestions was we're going to go through the Heart Sutra again. Instructions to the Cook by Dogen. Both of which we've done before, but oh yeah, well that's part of the entire collection. I mean, is that the entire Shobogenzo? Yeah. Oh, in one volume. Mine's in 4 volumes. This is did they condensed it down to, what is it, a microfont? What they do? Oh, this is. Oh, Okuhara Roshi is an amazing translator, and just a nice person.
There was a talk one of Izumi's Tension Roshi students gave a talk a while back, and he spoke
from this book.
And recommended it, and so it's like, wow.
Yeah, this is one book. This is one fascicle from the Shobogenzo, the entire Shobogenzo. So so instructions to the Cook is also from the Shobogenzo, the Genjo koan. All of them are parts of the same, by the same Zen master. And so because I was, completely unprepared, of course you're recording me on the day that I'm unprepared. Thank you, Tim. That's
Wing
okay.
it. Wing it.
I'm winging it.
Improvisation.
Yeah. Well, I had a conversation yesterday that was kind of sparked. Kind of an idea, and I realized because I'm on a Teams call, as we all are so often these days. Anyway, my Teams is Microsoft's Zoom. And Kaiser doesn't like Zoom because of potential hackers. So I'm on a Teams call with this. I'm on the committee for this training program we have for training human resources consultants, because we can't find them. It's a very difficult skill set. So we're trying to build our own. And as a result, they're having all of the directors, there are 13 of us, talk about our career journey and how we got to be in the positions we are. And one of the people who was reminding me of that was saying, oh, and you really should talk about tea ceremony. and how that has influenced your career. And he's one of these people, I don't mean to this is not a criticism, it's just something I've observed of him, is he likes to talk. So right after he gives me the suggestion of what to talk about, he proceeds to tell me what I should tell people. So, and I'm kind of just sitting there, chuckling to myself, listening to what he has to say, because he was very eloquent, with what he wanted me to say, and he just waxed rhapsodically about the beauty and tranquility and the transformational aspects of Japanese tea ceremony, and he was going on and on and on, and then he stops and says, well, what do you think, Arthur? And I stopped and said, well, your description is very apt for those people who have watched the tea ceremony, but not the experience of someone who has done the tea ceremony. and it just dawned on me that that's what a lot of people think of Zen in itself. And so, which is why we spend a lot of time kind of disabusing people of what they think Zen is, because there's even Dogen writes about the bliss and repose of Zazen, but it's how you get to that bliss and repose is by way of hell. So there is it's really, and it's antithetical to the way people want to think of it. People think that all this peaceful, calm sitting, you achieve it by getting rid of something, and it's really not that. It's really including all things, all reality just as it is, and letting that be where you are at all times. So it is not getting rid of those things we don't like, those things that cause pain. It's not getting rid of, difficult things. It's really about recognizing that all of it is a manifestation of the Dharma. All of it is what we are manifestation of, and we're not separate from any of it. And that's kind of a difficult thing to do. It sounds, it's easy to say to a certain extent, but it's hard to include everything. Which brought me back to, the question that people often ask me is, why did you start doing Zen? And I tell different people different things, depending on the audience, because most people won't know what I'm talking about if I lapse into, Buddha speak and speak about it from, well, the Buddha did that and said that, and and I really just, it's a very practical. This is why we were talking about instructions. It's a very practical practice for me because it allows me to center myself in all of this all the time. I'm sitting first thing in the morning. I center myself in this non-exclusionary allness, and and what I'm dealing with all day is a lot of very toxic energy. So I can let it in and be with it, because I can't resolve things or change things if I don't own it, if I don't recognize the energetics that are coming into my office and complaining all the time. And the Buddha, when I talk to Buddhists and they've read a little bit about the history, my answer is because this is the only spiritual practice that I know of, and I may be wrong about this, I don't know about all spiritual practices, but only spiritual practice which the founder started his enlightenment experience with the word all. It's the most inclusive experience that I've ever heard anybody express. All beings, all existence, nothing's left out. There's nothing that can be left out. All beings have the wisdom and virtue of the Tathagata, or the awakened one, and it's just a matter of doing the work for all beings to kind of realize that. So, except for, all beings have the wisdom of Tathagata, except for upside down thinking. Yeah, there it is. And so it's really about, so when I'm talking to people who understand that language, I talk about, well, then my sitting every morning is about me uninverting upside downing my thinking, because the upside down part is thinking that you should be something else, should be somewhere else, should be that which in that space, in that area, in that being that is peaceful and calm. And the real answer is that no, there's that peace and calm is right where you are, and you're sitting in the midst of reality just as it is, without trying to make it something else. That doesn't mean that you don't work in it or and resolve issues in it, but you are. That's just the work you do. You've taken a vow to save all sentient beings, including yourself, and that saving all sentient beings is about bringing people in alignment with reality. And so that's the approach I take at work, and that's a very different approach than, problem solving or getting rid of the problem, because that's what people come to me is, my sort of most humorous visitation this past week was this woman literally asked me to get rid of her manager. And I'm saying, well,
For the new people, he works in HR at Kaiser.
yeah.
You have a context of this.
Yeah. So, and I said, well, there are many options. I didn't immediately dismiss her request, but trying to use the most effective means of bringing people into recognizing that the reality is just as it is. We're not going to like everybody. We're not going to get along with everybody, but we do. But all the energetics that are presenting themselves to you are you, and you're not separate from all of that. So, I took a look at this book this morning because I hadn't prepared. And I thought, well, which one of these things have I not read that are really short? And I happened upon this fascicle from the Shobogenzo. It's entitled Hinzan, which translates as all-inclusive study. So we'll just go through the first two.
What is it translated to?
All-inclusive study.
Is there a page?
We got the same edition, so 197 in Moon and the Dewdrop. So Dogen was, either Dogen wrote really well or his translator writes really well. Not sure which it is, but it just starts out really beautifully. The great way of Buddha ancestors is to penetrate the ultimate realm, soaring with no strings attached, or like clouds shooting below your feet. It's like, wow, I want to be there. That is such a beautiful place that I think it exists. This being so, the world of blossoming flowers arises, and I am always intimate with this. Accordingly, sweet melon has a sweet stem. Bitter gourd has a bitter root. Sweet melon and its stem are sweet through and through. Thus the way has been studied thoroughly. So there's a koan within this. Great Master Zhang, I'm going to slaughter these Chinese names. Great Master Zhang Yi of Zhuansha was called upon by his master Zui Feng, who said, "Since you've prepared a traveling bag, why don't you go toward all-inclusive study?" Zhuangsha said, "Bodhidharma did not come to the eastern land. The second ancestor did not go to the western country." Zui Feng was deeply impressed with this. All-inclusive study means here to study as cartwheels, where sacred truth doesn't do anything. What degrees can there be? Did you get that? Yeah. So the koan is, since you've prepared a traveling bag, why don't you go toward all-inclusive study? As Wang Sha said, Bodhidharma did not come to the Eastern land. The second ancestor did not go to the Western country. Zhui Fang was deeply impressed with this. All-inclusive study means here to study as cartwheels, where sacred truth doesn't do anything. What degrees can there be? So what this is saying in all of this very flowery language is that you don't have to go anywhere or do anything to have everything. Right here where you are is where everything exists. So you got this traveling bag. Why don't you go toward all-inclusive study? There's no place that you need to go to include everything in your reality. And the answer, this master knew exactly what his teacher was trying to trick him into saying. His teacher was testing him. Are you trying to go get something? Are you trying to attain something? Are you trying to make yourself into something? And he says, Bodhidharma did not come to the Eastern land. Code word for Bodhidharma did come to the Eastern land. He traveled for many years from India to China. But that he didn't come to get anything. He already had everything. So there was no traveling. He was just where he was, wherever he was, he had everything already. And the second ancestor didn't go to the Western country. Same idea, no place to go, no place to run. Not that you don't move around and do things and act and live and do all the things you want, but wherever you are is right where you are, and wherever that is includes everything, just as it is. So this all-inclusive study means to study as cartwheels, where sacred truth doesn't do anything. So sacred truth doesn't, we don't have to conjure it up. It doesn't have to be created. It is already here. You are already it. So this is the allness, the all existence, this all beings that the Buddha was saying from the very beginning. You have so many other spiritual practices, and this is not to either compare them or make them right or wrong, but they're usually dualistic in some sense. Not that we don't engage in dualistic thinking every day all the time, so there's nothing wrong with that. It just functions a little bit differently than non-dualistic thinking. But usually there's something that you have to do or get rid of or become in order to be saved. So I was raised in, and I still hear to this day in my head when I'm being tempted to do something, the phrase that I heard often as a child was, get thee behind me, Satan. The idea that there was some outside force making me do things that were wrong was kind of the way I was taught to think as a child. Certainly, you're trying to separate yourself from that spider?
He's on the move again.
Yeah, he's.
Back to get you.
What was that? Oh. But these days, the Satan that needs to get behind me is me, because I need to, be considered. I'm not separate from the devil himself. And is this guy still alive?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's still alive.
He's sitting there resting. He's doing zazen right now. You already go.
I'm not going to kill him. I'm just going to move him if he moves again.
Yes. So that's kind of, as I consider my colleague's request to talk about Zen and tea ceremony as part of my how it influenced my career, if you will. I don't know if I actually will. I'll decide that. I've got another month before I have to make that presentation.
How would you answer that question?
Which one?
How is the tea ceremony?
Influenced my career?
Did you have an inkling of what that might be?
Yeah, well, the study of Zen, the study of tea ceremony, because tea ceremony comes out of the Zen school, is about mastery. Tea ceremony is the actualization of Zen. So if you come into a tea room prepared by a Zen master, by a tea master, the room is very spare. It's been cleaned. Anything that does not contribute to the tea ceremony has been removed from the room. So there's an alcove that has a screen that has flowers and a incense container. There's the hot water container, the tea container, the bowl, and the whisk, and cold water. That's the only thing you need to purify the room for the tea ceremony, make the tea, then clean up after the tea ceremony. Those three aspects take place all within the room. And everything else has been eliminated or removed. It takes several days to actually prepare for a tea ceremony. Back in the old days, you had to actually make the bowl. You had to carve the container, because you would, especially if someone high ranking in the culture was coming to do tea for you, if you were going to do tea for them, you made sure that everything was new. So you actually these people were craftsmen, so they knew how to make these things. So you make all new things and prepare the tea, and then you have to actually get tea leaves out of a container that you had in the house, and you had to grind it to make it into powder. So all that work, and you only ground up as much as you needed. So it's the practice of just enough, which is Dogen talks about in Instructions to the Cook. So it would take you probably a minimum 3 or 4 days just to get prepared, just to make that room prepared for maybe even just the one bowl of tea that you're going to make for your guests. So it's really focusing in on, first of all, who's coming? Who is my audience going to be? Or how many people are going to be in the entourage that will be arriving? What does this person need or appreciate? Because you want to set up, had this person given me any previous gifts? So you want to make sure that gift is on display. So it's really about paying attention to every detail, every aspect, and taking care of the person that's going to be in your tea room. It's much more convenient in the 21st century because all the stuff is made already. You can buy matcha tea that's already ground. You don't have to grind it yourself. We have I wouldn't have to get a piece of bamboo and make the tea whisk, because I could just buy tea whisks. So we're much more technologically advanced than we were 700 years ago with trying to make tea. But it is mastering each aspect of the tea ceremony and preparing to present that to your guests, really not in a way to bring attention to yourself, but to enhance the experience of the guest. So
It's like preparing for your day.
yeah,
Each morning.
yeah,
Step by step. Who's going to enter it?
yeah,
How you're going to cook your day.
yeah. So it's mastery of life in general. So my Zazen, I prepare for the day. Check the calendar to see You know, who's coming over? Which meetings do I have? You know, what's going to be the most effective way to deal with whichever union rep is going to be, you know, in my face that day, and also prepare for, you know, what might happen, because right now we're in a very volatile period. The UHW contract expires this year, so they are already gearing up and protesting, and you know, and trying to campaign for their new contract. So, I not only have I had to prepare myself, but I've had to prepare the management staff for what's going to be this onslaught of incursions into their department, because we've given the union the right to observe work, but they can't disrupt work. And the union will push that line as far as they can, and make such claims like the other day. I'm getting calls all day long. One of the calls I got was, so I sent everybody a reminder, they can observe, but they can only speak to their union members on breaks or lunch or before and after hours. And they may not do it in patient care areas. So the union tried to make a case of walking up to a ward clerk that was sitting in a nurse's station who didn't have anyone in front of them at the time. Well, they said they're not working, and the nurse's station is not a patient care area. So, so this is what I have to. Yeah, they're going to push that. And how are we going to respond to that? How are we going to handle that? So the invitation, and I remind the managers every day for the last 2 or 3 weeks I've been making this announcement. Be polite, be firm. If they get argumentative, do not engage. Call me. If you need to vent, do not vent there. Call me. Yell at me. I can take your yelling. Do not yell at the union. So it's really about, so that's the kind of mastery, that's the kind of patience and inclusion that comes with my Zazen. It's got to be there. I'm not going to go there and say, yeah, we need to get rid of these people. The unions, blah, blah, blah. Everybody, that's what, you know, and every 3 years we go through this, all the management is like, why do we have these people here? They're no good, blah, we need to get rid of them. Kaiser's been very pro-union since its beginning. The unions aren't going anywhere. So you, manager, who don't get along with the union will leave before the union will. So you need to kind of, you signed up for this, you knew what was coming. Deal with it well. So it is really about including, and the unions have, you know, actually complimented me, which is probably, you know, I take their compliments with a grain of salt, usually it's because they want something. I'm known for being fair, because I will listen to what they have to say, and if I can give them what they want, there's, you know, no skin off my teeth. They should, as long as it works and contributes to patient care, yes, we can do that.
I think it's also that they know that no matter how much they poke the bear, that you're not gonna react, and you're not going to hold it essentially against them,
Right.
And then punish them for, you know, whatever else next thing they do, or that you just deal with one thing and then deal with the next thing, and just you don't get emotionally involved in it, and therefore they can, you know, they know that they can. I mean, I think it's a sincere compliment. I
think you're right. It is. Yeah, I think they that's true. They know that they can come to me. You know, I get a call at 6 o'clock. I'm like, you know, I'm looking at the name of the union rep on my phone. I'm like, it is 6 p.m. Why are you calling? I am at home. It's Friday. And I'm like, you know, hey Paulina, how are you? Well, I'm gonna have to file a grievance. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? So, and then afterward, we're all, you know, we had a nice friendly conversation about what we're gonna do over the weekend. You know, after she's, you know, yelling at me about firing one of her, one manager fired one of their employees.
Is that refusal to engage?
Yeah.
It's that refusal to engage.
Yeah.
That is rare these days, because people, you know, we're taught to engage. You know, don't take shit from anybody. Blah blah blah. Stand your ground.
Yeah.
You know, so it's the fact that you refuse to engage in that process,
right,
that I think, you know, is important.
Yeah, and also, I expect it. It's their job to represent their members with all due diligence. And so
But the
when,
refusal to engage can sometimes look dismissive.
Mhm.
So you have to be really careful on it. I think you have to carefully act that one out, right? Because you look like,
yeah.
I'm not bothering with you.
Well, if you're not engaging, kind of, talk to the hand.
I'm not engaging.
You're not engaging. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not worth engaging with. Is really.
I think the key is to maybe engage in a way that's, professional and kind-hearted, but
Yeah.
just, move on.
Yeah. Well, when they start yelling at me, my response is, I hear you, and so did the dead. So. So it's but yeah, so the contribution of Zazen to all of it to my career is that I don't shut anybody or anything out. I let it all in and enjoy it. Actually, it is truly a space of bliss and repose in the midst of all the yelling and screaming. So every 3 years we renew the contracts. We go through this every 3 years. I have no reason to not expect this to happen. And the resistance just causes suffering. And to unfortunately bring everybody in line with that is very difficult, because I get it. They're trying to get patient care done. They've got people in line, and they've got these union people running around saying all kinds of things, and they weren't hired to do that. They were hired to take care of patients. So I have to acknowledge both sides. The managers are like, "Well, can you come get them?" I'm like, no. I can't remove them from your department. You're going to have to include them, bring them in. They are who we work with. They are our employees. These are the people who take care of our patients. And they have a voice. We've given them that voice. So this is the clouds shooting below my feet. Yeah.
So I use, oftentimes when you hear about spiritual practices, people talk about the need to surrender. So in this context, what would you say, how would you remark to that? Is there a need to surrender anything?
Yeah, surrender your resistance to it. Give up trying to make it something other than what it is. Because that's where the suffering is. We even in our own pain, we want the pain to stop. We want someone to fix it, give us a pill, cut it off, whatever, to stop the pain, instead of bringing the pain in. And part of the practice of Zazen is to kind of amp up your tolerance, because sitting for long periods of time hurts. It's physically painful. But are you going to die from it? Probably not. So how much pain can you tolerate? Not that you need to go out and intentionally put yourself in this is not about flogging yourself and dealing with as much pain and laying on a bed of nails. It's
It's Catholic.
yeah. But it is about really life is suffering. This is what it is. And what are we going to do about that suffering? We can't get rid of it. We can certainly deal with it in certain ways. And we've got, steps to take. The Buddha is very prescriptive. We've got the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And so there's a plan. There's a way to resolve some of these issues. It doesn't necessarily get rid of them. So understanding that you can only have the agency of choice when you own it. So really not resisting it, letting it in, knowing that it is not separate from you, feeling and really living as if it's not separate from you, and treating it as if it is you and taking care of it as if it's you and yours. is really the important part. So it is this embracing of it, and and working toward changing that which causes suffering. And there's no end to that. It's one of those impossible vows. Life is suffering. I vow to end it. That's your life's work. No matter what you do, or where you are, and you've decided to do that. And other spiritual practices do the same thing. My parents' religion is wants to save souls and let them get to heaven, which is the same as ending suffering and sitting in bliss and repose. They have a different idea of what that looks like. Some of it, my parents tend to be very literal about going to someplace.
Hell.
No.
Heaven.
They think that's where I'm going. But as this heathen now who practices this, false religion. But that's okay. I'll have plenty of friends.
So when you talk about, the agency of choice,
Yes.
I think for a lot of people, myself, I think I have choice, but oftentimes my choice is a reaction, like when do you get to that point where you now realize it's time to exercise that agency versus time to shut up, listen, take it in, feel it, own it. So I think for a lot of people, they think they put that agency of choice pretty close to the event, and they don't create that separation.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Zazen does for you. Is it gives you, because you're intentionally refusing to engage when you're in Zazen. Things are coming up in your head. Things, probably current problems, current issues, current things are coming up, but you've chosen not to engage for 30 minutes. That's it. You can engage after 30 minutes. So this practice gives you that pause, gives you the practice of that pause, so that it becomes pre-thought. So it's now embodied, and it works. You do it a little bit at a time. You start out sitting for 5 minutes, and for a lot of people, that's hard. That 5 minutes is the worst hell they've ever been through. So the guy who introduced me to my open mic group came to a beginner's mind retreat, and that's how we met. And that retreat was a day and a half. Whenever he tells this story, that day and a half for him, just grows exponentially. Oh, it felt like 3 years and sitting in silence. Oh my God, I don't know how people do it. And I just laughed. And usually we're standing in a group, and he's like, "Yeah, this is how I met Arthur." And he was like, "I don't know how he does it. It was so horrible." And I said, "It was a day and a half." It was a day, but it was hard. That's hard for people. So be gentle with yourself. Take care of yourself in this process, and you don't start out with 30 minutes. You don't start out with a 7-day session. You start out with 5 minutes. Do the 5 minutes until you're like, okay, I can wait 5 minutes. 5 minutes is good. Then it becomes comfortable. Then 10 minutes, 15, 20, get to 30. And that, because you're embodying that as a consistent practice, it's just like, you're practicing anything, practicing the piano. You play scale, you get better at it, you get faster. If you do it over and over again, it just completely takes over how you live after a while. So an event happens, and you're like, well, that event has come up in my mind many times, and I was still sitting for 30 minutes, and the event was okay. It didn't need me to respond right away. But not that there aren't things that don't need to be responded right away. Tension often talks about she was at Zen Center Los Angeles during the 94 earthquake. Is that when the last big earthquake was? This is the Northridge earthquake? I'm forgetting the year.
96, 97?
No.
Where's Mike? We need him.
I know, he's got it. Anyway, in the 90s, when we had that big earthquake, obviously they tried to sit through that earthquake. Because sitting started at UCLA at 4:30 in the morning. They were in Seychelles at the time. The earthquake, I mean, they started to sit they were in their seats by 4:15 because Maizumi Roshi did Kenton or rounds at 4:30. So he enters the Zendo at 4:25. That earthquake hit at 4:30 in the morning. So everyone had been sitting for a few minutes, and they continued to try to sit until tension began. Looked up, and he's a contractor who does construction. So he looks up and he goes, "That beam shouldn't look like that." And that's when he sounds the alarm and said, "Okay, everybody out." So unfortunately, sometimes this practice you can be taken a little bit too seriously and not react, when you need to. Fortunately, there was an expert in the room, tension, who said, "It's time to go because I don't think that beam's going to hold." So they moved. So this practice is about really knowing when to act and when not to act, because you don't have to respond to everything right away. Some things you do, but very few things. Most things can wait a few minutes. At least time to let it in, take in all the aspects, and that's what I do because everything is coming into my office is urgent. It's an emergency. People are in pain, and I have to remind myself, we do not work in the emergency room. No one is going to die from harassment. We will take in all the story and take time, and we will listen to what they have to say, and then decide. Because I get the calls every day. It's like, I've got to terminate this person today. I said, well, probably not. You can, if it's a real emergency, you can send the person home while we look at what happened and get the story before we make a decision. And more times than not, we don't terminate people. And terminating people is expensive, and a lot of times it's not necessary. There are other, mechanisms short of termination that we can do. So sitting with that, being with it, and being quiet in the midst of it is the gift of this practice.
Yeah, I was just going to say, different groups, right? Different cultures have different response times.
Yeah.
I think in Western, the response time is almost like as soon as I stop talking, the other person should start talking immediately. But I know Finnish culture, which is part of my heritage, is that they tend to pause. They pause a lot longer, and they're sort of thinking what they want to say because they hold their words as like a promise. Mm-hmm. And if they're going to say they're going to do something, they want to make sure they can commit to that doing. Mm. I think Japanese culture, if I'm not mistaken, is that the same way, that they, on that regard, they tend to respond slower. But so I think it's sometimes these things are culturally built into in terms of like what that person is looking at us, expecting a response.
Yeah.
And we meet them with silence.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be. It's also, depending on because I work in a hospital, so everything is, we kind of think that all things are life and death, and certainly in some instances that's very true. And so the doctors need to respond, nurses need to respond, but that's not true for everything. So not, rubber stamping our response to everything, the same way, just because, someone comes into my office and they're like, I've got a problem, you've got to fix it, stat! And I just sort of think, okay, well, yes, it's a problem, and yes, we have to resolve it. I don't think that we need to do it right this minute. All right, I think I've yammered on for long enough. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, everybody.